we are going to discuss happiness and suffering. And you might wonder, why on earth is she talking about happiness and suffering in the same? But in Buddhism, well, probably in real life as well, they're the exact, not in real life, but in Western way of thinking, they're complete opposites. And sometimes it's useful to analyze opposites. It kind of makes, well, it's a different way of the brain, to think. Sometimes, for me anyway, it definitely resonated differently when I looked at these topics together. So make any movements that you need to make to adjust. And if you normally lie down during meditation, I'm going to ask you just to wait for a moment. And if it's not comfortable to sit cross-legged or on the knees, then feel free to sit in a chair or a sofa. But I was watching a video today about the Dalai Lama, or not today, but this weekend. And he did this exercise that I love the Dalai Lama anyway, but I just liked the exercise, so I thought we'd try it. It's a way to calm the mind. So before we begin anything at all, let's calm the mind. So I'm going to do the opposite way that you are. So with your left. So place your hands, well, first of all, make a fist. So we want the thumbs like on the inside, like this. And then we make a fist. So sticking the arms out, and then bringing the hands over to the left. So your left, the opposite to what I'm doing. And place your right fist into your armpit. So it's like, so we're going to close the arm, the left arm, and your fist should be in there. And this helps if you have a blockage in your nostril, it kind of helps open it if you keep it there long enough. So with your index finger, I'm going to block the right nostril and inhale through the left. And then change the index finger, exhale out through the right. Changing to the left. Exhale through the right. So each time you inhale or exhale, you change the finger and just carrying on, maybe closing the eyes or keeping them open or looking at the floor if that feels good. Seeing if we can fill the lungs up even bigger with each inhale. And making sure we empty out all of the old stale air as we exhale. And the next time you exhale, letting the hands fall back towards the lap. And with the hands and fists again, reaching the arms out and over to your right. So the other side or the opposite to what I'm doing. And the right finger comes to the nose. And let's inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. And still consciously making the breaths as deep as we can. Emptying out all the lungs. Imagining that we're rejuvenating the body, cleaning it out to accept any new perspectives we might learn or any new feelings or sensations we might think. And exhaling out anything that's kind of sitting with us that we can't seem to get rid of. Next next time you exhale, allowing the hands to fall back into the lap. And keeping that fist with the hands, placing them in the lap, so it doesn't matter if the palms are up or down, just comfortable. And close the eyes for a minute. And breathe through both nostrils, inhaling and exhaling through both nostrils. Releasing the fists, opening the eyes, making any movements that we need to. I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes. If you want to sit up and listen, that's fine. But if you want to get into your meditation posture, cracking today, then go ahead and lie down or whatever it is that you do. Remembering that the most important thing is that we keep a long spine. So you find length, allowing the body to fill the air with oxygen, and exhale to help us have a calm mind. So, happiness and suffering. If we look at the Merriam-Webster definition of happiness, it is a state of well-being or contentment, or a pleasurable and satisfying experience. So that does generally, if we say we feel happy, we're having a pleasurable experience, it's satisfying, we feel good. And Merriam-Webster defines suffering as to submit or be forced to endure, or to feel keenly, labor under, suffer, or to put up with, especially as inevitable or unavoidable. So, this is the Western way of thinking, right? That's what suffering is. So putting up with, especially as inevitable or unavoidable. But if we look at that, aren't some happy situations unavoidable as well? Like, I'm trying to think now, but I guess, there's lots of situations, when we get a job that we've really wanted, or when we get married, generally people, that's kind of an unavoidable happiness, isn't it? It's not necessarily to put up with, especially as inevitable. It's not inevitable that we'll get married or anything, but it's inevitable that we will feel love at some point for something or someone. So that's an interesting definition. But anyway, that's a different tangent. So if we look at the Buddhist definitions, suffering means that we want things to be different than they are. That's it. We want things to be different than they are, which makes a lot of sense, because if we are causing the suffering, I was watching a video by Venerable Hung Chi, who's a monk that I've just came across in this weekend, and he gave the definition. So if a person is raped, it's not the actual rape that causes the long-term suffering. Of course, if there's physical bodily harm, then there's suffering. But what causes the suffering long-term is the wish that had never happened, was maybe the feelings that we have, especially in certain cultures, if a female is raped, then that girl will be tainted by society, so it's that suffering of, I wish that never happened to me, I want it to be different. And that's what causes the suffering. And there's actually quite a lot of literature about sexual violence, sexual abuse in Buddhism, which I find fascinating given my background in dealing with sexual offenders. And it talks about these groups that are formed with Buddhist ways of thinking, and how the victims, like certain victims, I wouldn't say get over, but work through their suffering by gaining a different perspective. And then other victims will actually leave the group because they're so appalled that this person was able to let go of this injustice that had happened to them. So it's really interesting. It's all about perspective. It's all about how can we let go of wanting things to be a certain way. Because on the opposite end of that is happiness. So we understand and accept things as they are. We don't want them to be different. We don't, I guess if you look in happy relationships, they're not wanting the other person to change. They're accepting that person, they're understanding them for their faults, and they're happy for it. Whereas the unhappy relationships where there's a lot of suffering is, oh, you just be different. I just wish he would do this. Like myself included. I'm really, I just wish that he could do this. And then it causes suffering and there's a breakdown of the relationship. Hence why I'm single. So if I could be happy in a relationship where I can understand and accept things, and of course there's certain things we should never accept, such as, abuse. That's not something. Don't stay in a relationship and try to become happy if you're being, physically or emotionally harmed. But there are certain things like, I don't know if a person doesn't put the dishes in the sink or wash them right away, like, come on, like those are things we can understand and accept and not want them to be different, because it's the wanting them to be different that causes the suffering. And if we think about it, I was having a conversation with a friend this weekend about this concept. And when we're unhappy, and I've mentioned this before in my meditations, is, when a client comes into a psychologist office saying, I feel bad, generally the first thing, especially the school of thought that, school of psychology that I was taught in was, oh God, what can you do to feel better? We want to make you feel better. Buddha says, how can you accept how you feel right now? How can you understand how you feel right now? Or the situation that you're in. And I think that's a much healthier, more realistic way of thinking at it. Because when we're happy, if you come into a psychologist office and say, I'm happy, they're not going to say change it. They're going to say, why are you coming here? Go off and live your life. So why should we look at the opposite way? We're human beings with a range of emotions. And it's about accepting that. Because if we don't understand and accept emotions, circumstances, thoughts, other people's behavior, we're always going to live a life of suffering. So let's look at that today. And let's look at that knowing that we're going to leave here today finding it really difficult to understand and accept whatever we're thinking, because it's hard. And I practice this like every single day, multiple times a day, accept it, understand it, analyzing it. And I fail quite regularly. So, and I've been doing this for a while. So be patient, be understanding, be happy that you've come here today. Happy as in understand and accept that you've watched this video today and that you're making steps to suffer less. Okay, so we don't want to be, let's not make the goal huge. The long-term goal can be happiness eventually. But that's like way off. We might be on our deathbeds and thinking, oh, finally I've understood the Buddhist concept of happiness. But let's suffer less. Let's make that our goal. Let's have less suffering, okay? So just a quote from the Venerable Hung Chi, who I saw this, or came across this weekend, online, of course. You will never be satisfied in your life until you stop wanting and start being. So instead of ignoring the suffering and instead of wanting the suffering to go away, and yes, we are wanting happiness, but do we want happiness, or do we just, well, yeah, happiness, I guess. I mean, and it is a want, so there is a little conflict of interest there, something to think about how that makes sense to you. But I guess it's understanding this concept of happiness, and as we're working towards the eventual goal, with patience, with kindness, with love and compassion for ourselves, knowing that it may take us a long time to get there, but, we're working on it. And one day we'll notice a shift, and one day we'll notice we're not suffering as much. One day we'll notice that the little voices in our head are actually arguing with the voice that's like, I want. And it's, let's sit with this, let's understand, let's accept. Okay. And again, and I'll do this at the end of the meditation exercise, embracing all feelings as they rise and fall, like the tide here in Falmouth. The fear and resistance to emotions is what causes suffering. The fear and resistance to a traumatic event is the fact that we've changed, we've seen a new, different perspective. not the event itself. COVID will go away, and hopefully the extent of this suffering and lockdown and restrictions will hopefully go away in 5 years, and they may not, but let's, in an ideal world, let's say they do. And then the fear and resistance of what happened, of it happening again, is causing the suffering. So let's accept it, let's understand it, let's work on exploring this in a different way of thinking. All right. Closing the eyes and coming to our space, our open space, our safe space. Relaxing the shoulders, allowing them to fall away from the ears. Closing the eyes or finding a soft gaze. Grounding yourself in this space, imagining what's around us, parts of nature. Reminding ourselves that there's no distractions, so no technology, no other people. Spending the next moments with ourselves in a non-judgmental, safe space, looking at things in a different way. Looking for things as how they are, the true nature of it. Impermanent, ever-changing. And coming back to the breath, which we started working on in the beginning of the session. So inhaling this white light of acceptance and understanding. Exhaling attachment, this idea of grasping, of want. Inhaling acceptance, understanding. Exhale, letting go of grasping. And with this calm, open, non-grasping mind, think of a situation that's causing you suffering. It can be anything. It can be a pain in the body. It can be a person that you want to be different. So remembering the suffering is you want something different. That opens it up. I want tons of things to be different right now. So, for example, I'm going to use lockdown because I'm getting increasingly frustrating every day with the restrictions of my movement, my freedom rights, as I call them. Very egotistical way of thinking, I'm aware. So I'm causing myself a lot of suffering by wanting this to be over, by wanting travel restrictions to be lifted, by allowing all of this space, the social distancing to end, because I want a hug. I want to leave England and I want my transient life back. I want. On that term of I want, I remember when I first moved to Colombia, and I lived with the Colombian captain, and I used to say, oh, I want this, I want that. And like if it was something really easy like food or drink, normally that's what I want, he would provide it for me. And then I would say, oh, I want, I don't know, something bizarre. And I think we as Americans, I'm going to limit it down, well, a lot of the Western world, use this want as if, this word want as a need. And I think that needs to change in our thinking. Not even it would be nice to have, but just looking at all of the things in front of us. Maybe that's something we can do, is just take, part of the suffering is the wanting. Or the suffering is the wanting. So let's take the want out of our vocabulary, out of our thoughts. And thinking of this situation that's causing us suffering, is there a part of it that we can control? If we can control part of it, then there's no need to suffer. Contemplate on how to change it. If we can't control it, then what's the point of trying to? What's the point of grasping onto this idea or hoping it'll change when we have no control over it? So what can we control? Our reaction to the situation. If we're fighting with the situation, if we're fighting with a partner or a child to put something away, to do things in the way that we want them to be done, it's our want, our suffering. How is it going to help to focus on how unjust the situation is, or how annoying the situation is, or why can't they just? How does that help? Oftentimes when we find that our reaction, first we change the thinking, which changes the reaction of ourselves, which changes the reaction of the other person, which changes the environment that we're in. And trust me, this can take years, but it works. I've slowly, patiently worked through situations like this. So if there's no part of the situation we can control, let's focus on controlling the reactions in our mind. We'll do this by exploring and beginning to take an understanding of the situation. So, for example, with my situation of being frustrated with lockdown and social distancing, that if I look at it from a different point of view, the government is scared. Like, when in our lifetime have we ever come across a situation like this? We haven't. So they're scared. They don't know how to handle it. They have this, like when I work in a group, I have 8 people I have to manage, plus my co-facilitator. That's 10 of us in a room. The World Health Organization, the governments, they have a whole world and country. They have no idea how to handle it. So instead of wanting things to be different, I can understand and look at it from their perspective of suffering, of their complete lack of how to deal with this. Travel restrictions aren't something I can control. I also can't speak it today. So what can I do? I can accept that I can't go anywhere. I can understand that the government is doing this with the best of intentions to stop the spread of the disease. Now, of course, there's other conspiracy thoughts that I do have in my mind sometimes, but let's look at it from a rational point of view. I accept I can't go anywhere, so what can I do to occupy my time right now? So how can you understand the situation that you're in? The mind will inevitably wander off to being annoyed, to being irritated, but I want it different. So bring it back to the neutral perspective. We are observers in this open space. Our minds are as spacious as the space we are in. Explored from different, creative, crazy angles. How can we understand the situation? If it's a person that's annoying you, try to understand why that person might be the way they are. They're suffering too. They want something different. They might want happiness, and they use control of others to find happiness. Or, there are people out there that do wake up in the morning and say, how can I irritate people? But why? Let's feel sorry for those people. Let's understand. Maybe they came from a horrible upbringing. Maybe they're suffering some physical pain that makes them grumpy and grouchy. finally coming to acceptance. I see the situation for what it is. So repeat what I'm about to say in your mind. I see the situation for what it is. I understand what I can and cannot control. I understand and accept the situation as it is. The situation may not be how I want it, but that's okay. This too shall pass. For the next minute or so, repeating this acceptance in the mind. I see the situation for what it is. I understand and accept it. And even if the mind is fighting and saying, oh my God, I just wish it was different. Oh, I want this, I want that. That's okay. Bring it back. Every time your mind says that, bring it back with, I understand and accept the situation. There is some truth in that, pretend to be happy or pretend to be a certain way and eventually you believe it. There is truth in that. And with this sense of acceptance, opening up the rucksack, the imaginary rucksack. Placing a tool or a learning point from today's session into the rucksack. Placing it on the back. And walking, sailing, hiking, biking, whatever it is, back into the reality that we're currently in. Noticing any sounds around us. Noticing the feel of the clothing or the places where our body is touching the ground or a seat. And gently, slowly blinking open the eyes. And taking a moment, no matter how you're feeling, if you're feeling more acceptant and understanding of the situation, knowing that just like me, I will walk off this mat and feel good probably for half an hour before I want something to be different again. And that's okay. And we're going to practice and we're going to keep at it because persistence will work. And for those of you that maybe a shift did happen today, that's amazing. And go away with that feeling as if you've accomplished something, for yourself and to better the human race, to feel more compassionate towards others. Remembering that this is all patience, that this is a long journey. With support, you will get there. With practice, you will get there. And we'll dedicate this practice to somebody that may need it today. And I will fill the room, the space with compassion as I cite the 4 measurables. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never be dissociated from the supreme happiness, which is without suffering. May they remain in boundless equanimity, free from attachment to close ones and rejection of others. I thank you very much for joining and for listening today. And I hope you have a very mindful and present day. Thank you.